Okay, great. Right, let's get started. So, hello and welcome to this Civic Future webinar event. What are the Civic Future Talent Programmes? I think everyone who's going to join the call has probably already joined. So, thank you to everyone for showing an interest in the talent programmes. It's much appreciated. My name is Jack Hutchison, and I am the Programme Director here at Civic Future. That means I'm in charge of the fellowship programme, with applications now open for our third cohort. And that's for people with less than 10 years career experience. We're also delighted to have launched our new public leadership program, which is for those with more than 10 years career experience. And that's in response to overwhelming demand, and there being loads more experienced and senior people who want to be part of our program. So we're very excited about that, and we can tell you a little bit more about that today. We're going to be going into a bit more detail about both on this call. In terms of a brief agenda, our Chief Executive Munira Mirza will give an overview of Civic Future itself, our objectives and mission, what we've been up to for the past 2 years or so. I'll then speak for about 10 minutes or so on the fellowship, and then my colleague Harry Fletcher-Wood, who leads the public leadership program, will then do the same. And then we'll open up for questions. I think depending on how many we'll get, we'll probably finish sometime between 7:15 and 7:30. So we'll just keep going really until we've run out of time or we've run out of questions. If you would like to ask a question, please email it to info@civicfuture.org, and someone in our team is going to be keeping an eye on that inbox ahead of the Q&A later on. Munira, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jack. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us and taking an interest in Civic Future and our programmes. As Jack said, I'm Munira Mirza. I'm the Chief Executive. I'm one of the co-founders of Civic Future. And I'm just going to say a few words about our organisation, what our mission is, why we were founded. And then hopefully that will set a bit of context for the programmes which Jack and Harry will talk about. I and my co-founder Pamela Dow have worked in government on and off for around 15 years. We've worked at both regional and national level, and we have worked through some of the most momentous changes in Britain over the last decade: COVID, Brexit, major policy reforms, and throughout that time, and throughout all our interactions with politicians, special advisors, civil servants, we both came away from government feeling that first, it was extremely important that we had talented people in government, and we felt that as a country, we're not doing enough to attract the many smart, capable people around the country to come and work in incredibly important roles in government, but also that it's incredibly important that we prepare and train and develop the people who go into these roles, and we give them more of a grounding in some of the different policy areas, some of the big philosophical questions and debates of our time, because ultimately the people who are making decisions that will affect the rest of the country, affect the population, need to be as well prepared for these kinds of decisions as they possibly can be. And so we spent a lot of time looking at programs around the world, and we've created, we think, a range of events, fellowship programs, conferences that we hope will give more people a chance to understand the government, understand politics, and get more involved. And Jack and Harry can talk in a bit more detail about the fellowship and the public leadership program, which we're launching for the first time this year. For those of you who are interested in our wider program, you can see details of our public events on our website, and we've done events on a whole range of issues, from free speech to immigration to crime and security to geopolitics. And we are non-partisan, we're not party political because we are a charity. So we've had speakers from across the political spectrum, ranging from people like Lord Adonis and David Blunkett, former Labour ministers, right through to former ministers like Michael Gove and special advisors like Dominic Cummings. We've also had practitioners in government who come from the world of science and tech. We've had Lord Valence, Sir Patrick Valence. along with people like Matt Clifford speaking at our events, and peers of the realm, people like Gisela Stewart. So we have a range of experts that we bring in, and we hope that we will give people a better insight into how government works, and hopefully inspire them to get more involved. So please do consider applying to these programs. I'll be staying on the call to answer questions as well. I would like to just say a little bit as well about our general approach to looking at politics and government. I've said this many times in the media and at public events, but I do feel that Britain is at a turning point, and we are facing incredibly important challenges. We are facing economic stagnation. Our public services are not working as well as they should. People are very worried about security and about Britain's place in the world. I think we're seeing increasing polarization, and we're great believers that open debate, free speech, being able to talk about issues frankly is important for restoring a healthy political culture. So a great deal of what we do is talking about those big issues and trying to get away from what we think is a sort of trivia that sometimes dominates the news. And I'm hoping that for those of you who do apply and are successful, that you'll get a real chance to think and engage with the really important ideas that will shape this country and its future. I will hand back over to Jack now, but I will be around for questions as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Munira. So the subject of this event is what are the Civic Future Talent Programmes? So I'll kick off with a bit of background on the fellowship. So over the past 2 years, we've built up this programme that takes 14 highly talented people in each cohort, puts them through a year of training and discussion in 3 main areas: political philosophy, foreign policy, and domestic policy. Understanding governance and how to govern is the overarching theme of the whole programme. The guiding philosophy behind much of our thinking is that we're bringing together a group of individuals who are driven to see the country run in a better and a more effective way, as Munira says. So people who are tired of stagnation, economically, culturally, whatever it is, and want to put themselves in the arena and enter into public life. And that's public life understood broadly in that definition. So you might want to be an MP or an advisor or a senior civil servant or a journalist, whatever it is. But we think those that want to go into public life need to be engaging with complicated ideas in philosophy, history, science, economics, technology, as well as getting the skills like public speaking and decision-making to enable them to become effective public leaders. Okay, so what does the fellowship actually involve? There are 3 terms, as I said: political philosophy, foreign policy, and domestic policy. We also have 2 residential weekends in the year, and then an overseas trip to Singapore for a week. The terms run for 10 weeks each, and the time commitment from you is 90 minutes on each Wednesday evening for in-person sessions held in Westminster. The first term on political philosophy asks big questions about the future of liberalism, the role of the state, ethics of things like border control, of free speech, the long-term future, etc. And in that term, we do read some classic texts: Mill, Locke, Hobbes, Nozick, Hayek, as well as some more contemporary thinkers. And those sessions are led by academics currently teaching philosophy at major universities. The second term is on foreign policy, which is primarily about Britain's strategic interests and national security. How do we respond to the US pivot to the Asia Pacific, understanding Europe and the EU, the rise of China, the future of the Middle East. And that's led by practitioners, diplomats, as well as a couple of former ambassadors to those countries and regions. And then the third term is domestic policy. So how do all of the different parts of government fit together? How does number 10 work in practice, taught by people who've actually been there? How can we reduce immigration? How can we increase economic growth? What would civil service reform look like? The health service? How will AI impact democratic institutions? So there's a lot there. The retreat weekends are mainly about governance. So we hear from former senior ministers, former SPADs. We do some public speaking and complex decision-making training to try to really understand how government can work when it's at its best. And so those are more practical sessions. And then finally, we hold this Easter trip to Singapore for a week, which is a really fascinating experience, meeting Singaporean ministers and senior civil servants, departments, as well as business leaders, startup people. I suppose the question we're asking is, how does a completely different area of the world work, and what does their best practice look like? And we go to Singapore because it brings all three strands of that program that I've just outlined. It brings them together. So political philosophy, foreign policy, and domestic governance. And it brings them together in, I suppose you could call it a living case study. So Singapore is a really small nation, very particular approach to state building, economic growth, individual freedoms, which makes it an ideal setting to challenge some of those assumptions that we formed during term 1 and term 2. It's an absolutely fascinating place. Seemingly contradictory philosophies all get tested on the ground. So they've embraced open markets while retaining a strong state, high living standards, grappling with questions of individual liberty at the same time. And I think being there in person prompts us to think a bit more deeply about how national identity and culture intersect with this policy making in ways that you simply can't really replicate in a classroom when you're just sitting and learning from a lecture. I also think that from a foreign policy perspective, Singapore is this masterclass in navigating global power dynamics. So it's a very, very interesting place. So that's an absolutely packed program. It requires about 45 hours commitment from you for the terms in terms of those 90-minute sessions, plus travel and reading time, plus the retreat weekends and the week-long trip to Singapore, as I said. I think it's also worth saying that the fellowship is a foundation, and you'll be provided with a foundational level of knowledge. So we're covering a lot of material across the course of the year. And I think it's fair to say that each session topic could potentially fill a whole university term. So you'd be aware of that. So who is our ideal fellow? Obviously that matters if you're currently thinking of applying to the program. I think that's a broad category and we don't like to be too specific, but if you're in general a highly driven person, most likely in your 20s, who wants to drag Britain out of stagnation and into abundance, then this is the program for you. So we formerly had software engineers, prison and army officers, lawyers, think tank people. We've had teachers, physicists. So really it's for anyone who, from any background, that really has this commitment to entering public life. I think very importantly, the program is designed, as is the public leadership program, to be conducted alongside a full-time job, and it's completely free for participants. So all fellows receive a stipend to cover the cost of travel and books and whatever else you need to fully engage with the experience. I think there's also more information on all of this stuff in the program brochures, which are on our website. And I think there's some comments as well on the website from fellows who've done it before, and they've really benefited from it. Okay, so briefly on the application process itself. So applications are open now. Firstly, there's this written application stage where there are a number of questions to complete. And then secondly, we narrow it down from the hundreds of applications that we get each year to take 40 through to interview in May. And from there, we select 14 final fellows in June. So it is very competitive. I think over the last 2 years, we've had about 600 applications and there are only 14 places. But obviously, we think that reflects the quality of the fellowship and how much you'll get out of it. So as I said at the beginning, the fellowship is aimed at people who've got less than 10 years career experience. The new public leadership program, which is a very exciting program, and Harry's about to talk about that in a moment, is for people with more than 10 years career experience. So Harry, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Yeah, so Jack said there's scope within the fellowship for people who are in their 20s and want to drag Britain out of its stagnation. But Civic Future has often been asked, what if I'm in my 30s or 40s or 50s and want to drag Britain out of its stagnation? And so the Public Leadership Programme, which we're launching this year, is our response to this. So this will be our first cohort. We are looking to support people who are a little bit further into their careers, and the kind of rough benchmark we're offering is 10 plus years and really having achieved significant success in whatever you set out to do in your first decade of career. And you're now thinking, A, what should I do next? What's my next challenge? And B, these issues that Munira has spoken to are ones which are calling to me, and I would like to be part of the solution. And so the public leadership program is designed to help you to act as a springboard to help you get into a role in which you can solve them. Primarily, we're thinking about elected office. That might be as an MP, might also be as a mayor, a police and crime commissioner, or potentially a senior role in government. What are we going to be looking at across the program? So we want you to finish the program with a really strong understanding of a few things. First of all, a deep sense of how Westminster, Whitehall, Parliament work and how when they don't work. You'll have the chance to hear about people who've really been in the rooms, hammering the tables, trying to make things work, or frustratedly struggling and not seeing them work, or better still, actually achieving substantial successes. We're going to look at economic growth and infrastructure in detail. You may have seen, Britain is a world leader in bat tunnels and fish discos, things that chew up quite a lot of time and energy and money. We're less good at building runways, nuclear power stations, various other things that might be slightly more useful. That'll be our first big topic. We're then going to look at public services, and particularly we're going to contrast education and health. Education, where we've seen substantial improvements in student learning over the last 15 years and really quite interesting reforms, along with various challenges. And health, where we've seen lots of challenges, but perhaps less of the progress we might have hoped for. And then final topic we're going to look at in depth is going to be public safety and security. So why is crime rising? Why are we struggling to maintain control of our borders? And what sort of things might we be able to do something about that? So we've chosen these topics to try and give you a sort of rounded sense of the different issues that you might need to tackle in public life. How do we grow the economy? How do we reform and improve public services? How do we keep people safe? We're hoping that by tackling those, you'll walk away with a really clear sense and deep understanding as and when you get into public life of here are the issues, here's my understanding of them, and hopefully an initial sense of, okay, here are some things that might be done about them. The program itself lasts from September of this year through to January of the next. And there are a few key pillars, key experiences that you'll enjoy if you're part of it. First is we're going to do quite a lot of reading and reflection, and we're going to read some exciting blogs, papers, things that have pushed our thinking and of people within and beyond government about the topics that I've mentioned there. We're then going to meet each month from September through to December. Once a month, we'll hear from an expert speaker, and that might be an academic with particular expertise in the topic. It might be someone with deep policy expertise. There'll also be a chance to bring together that reading and thrash out ideas in your own mind. And then in January of next year, we'll take a 2-day immersive retreat, which will bring everyone together on the program to be an opportunity to sort of distill, synthesize everything that we've learned, and then to map out what it all means for you, where you're going to go next, and what your pathway might be into public life. In practical terms, lots of things overlap with what Jack has said. It's free of charge, and we are able to support means-tested travel bursaries if needed. All the events will be in person. We really want to build a strong, cohesive cohort, build really strong relationships. Again, it's designed to fit around people working full-time and working successfully in demanding jobs. So we limit things and make things as efficient as possible. And we're going to work really hard to connect you both to each other and perhaps to others who might be able to help you with your next step into public leadership. Who's the ideal participant? I've alluded to this. As Jack says, there's no one prototypical person we're looking for, but we are hoping that you'll be someone who has achieved great things in whatever you've been doing over the last few years, and you're thinking hard about what you can do next and are ready to make that step. The timeline for applications is very similar to the fellowships. Applications are open now. They're closing on the 16th of March. We'll be interviewing in May and sharing a decision with you in June. With that, thank you. And I'll hand back to Jack, but we're looking forward to your applications.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Harry. Right, let's open up for questions. The email address, as I said at the beginning, is info@civicfuture.org. I'm sure there's quite a few questions because we haven't been able to cover everything in the 20 minutes or so that we've been on the call. As I said, what we'll do is we'll kind of keep going until we run out of time or run out of questions. So I imagine we'll finish up about 10 past or quarter past or so. While you're writing them, while you're sending them in, I'll also quickly say if these are issues that you're thinking about, and the programs intrigue you, but for whatever reason, you aren't able to apply this year, maybe because of work commitments or location or whatever, then please do get in touch anyway. There'll be loads of other ways to get involved in our work. So there's public events, there's themed workshops, we do training in economics and certain policy areas and everything like that. So send an email to, maybe not right now because everyone's sending in their questions, but send an email perhaps tomorrow to info@civicfuture.org, and we can pick it up from there. Okay, right. Some of our first questions. If I have applied before, can I apply again? I suppose this is about the fellowship, so I'll answer this one. Yes, of course, totally. If you've applied before, by all means apply again. I wouldn't necessarily send in exactly the same application because there may have been a reason that you weren't selected the first time around. But completely, just because you've applied before, there's absolutely no barrier. And it may be, of course, that over the last year or so, you've been doing some really interesting things. So yeah, completely, that's absolutely fine. What else do you have here? What if I'm not sure whether I want to pursue an MP route or go into the civil service? Am I better off waiting to apply until I'm 100% decided, or can I figure that out during the program? Munira, what do you? I suppose that's for the public leadership program. So either Harry or Munira can answer.
I'm happy to. Sorry, Munira. I'll chip in and then come back to you. So I think craving 100% certainty is probably a fool's errand. We're very rarely certain of anything. So I'd encourage you to apply, and this is hopefully something that will help you to make that decision. Clearly, if you're very much, throwing darts at the wall and have no idea what to do, maybe give yourself a bit more time. But if you're thinking hard and trying to work out, okay, where's the best place for me, dive in and see what you can learn from the program.
Yeah, can I just add to that? Certainly on the fellowship, which is for the younger cohort, there are lots of people who come onto the program who are not sure where they want to be in 10 years' time. And part of the reason for applying is because they want to spend time learning more about how government works and get to meet other people. And by the end of the year, more of them have a sense of the direction they might want to go in. So that's part of the aim of what we're doing. For the public leadership program, it's helpful if people have a bit more of a sense of the direction they want to go in. But again, we know that lots of people are not sure if elected office is for them. They might not know any MPs, and they want to use this as a way of understanding and meeting some and learning about what it's like to be an MP or to hold another elected office. So don't worry too much if you haven't got a clear 10-year plan ahead of you. But you can make that point in the application. That's perfectly fine.
A question which is sort of off the back of that, Munira, which is, it sounds as if the focus for the public leadership program is on elected office, but is there scope for people interested in non-executive director or advisory roles in government or things like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we expect that probably the majority of the people on the public leadership program will be interested in standing for office. But some people might decide it's not for them, either at the beginning or at the end. So there are lots of opportunities. There are hundreds of appointments made every year to public bodies like the NHS, like museums and other national institutions. Those might be more appropriate. We do also separately run separate events for people interested specifically in public appointments, either as breakfasts or dinners. So if that's something you're more interested in, I would encourage you to send an email to us and say, that's the sort of thing you're interested in. Give us your CV or your background, and we can probably give you some advice about whether applying for the programs is right or whether we should just invite you to a different event that we might do. I hope that helps answer the question.
Great, thank you, Munira. Right, we're getting loads of questions in now, which is great. One for Harry, I suppose. What's the outcome for participants on the public leadership program? What are they getting out of it at the end?
At the end, hopefully you'll know lots of things that you didn't know, or you'll at least know more about them at a deeper level. So you'll have heard perhaps from people in the corridors of power and stories that you took in through the newspapers. You'll now have a better sense of how the sausage is made, as it were. And then hopefully you'll have a much clearer sense of what you're going to do next. So it's a chance not just to learn about the outside world, but to think hard about yourself, where your strengths are, what your next steps are, and hopefully make some of the contacts that you'll need to take those steps.
Great. I'll also come in on that from the fellowship perspective. I would say by the end of the fellowship, you're probably expecting to gain a solid grounding in political philosophy, foreign policy, and domestic governance, as I said, but as well as these real hands-on leadership skills. The whole purpose of the fellowship really is that it's immersive and it's designed to really deepen your knowledge of some of these serious challenges that Britain has. Of course, it's also a great way to expand your network. So there's loads of senior political and policy figures leading the sessions. And it's important to note that at the end of the programme, we put fellows in touch with senior people working in public life who have a kind of informal mentor type relationship, and that person can really give you advice on career opportunities, whatever else, how to make the best impact that you can in your future career. And of course, there's also the Civic Future Alumni Network, which is expanding rapidly each year, which you kind of graduate into. But it's not, you don't get a certificate, at the end. It's for the experience, the knowledge that you gain, and the people that you meet. Okay. Right, there's absolutely loads of questions. I haven't had time to read them. One for Harry, can you provide a bit more information on the speakers for the public leadership program?
So as I'm not going to name names at this stage, as we said, we'll try and bring in the people who are most going to boost your understanding. So it's either sector experts, people who've thought really hard about energy policy or nuclear regulation or health service reform, whatever it is, or it's those who've held office either within civil service or within government itself, or opposition, who are in a position to tell you about what they've tried to do and the constraints that they've been under. So yeah, experts, essentially people who will push your thinking and help you see the world in a new way.
And just to jump in, you can tell from our website and the events that we hold that we have a range of people who've worked in government and politics, as Harry says. But we also have writers, historians, people who've kind of got an intellectual grasp of Britain, of the wider world. I can see one of the questions is asking about the kinds of speakers that we, kinds of readings that we might have. I don't know if Jack, that's something that you might also want to pick up on.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll talk generally about the readings and then I can get a bit more specific. So at least for the fellowship, we're talking about 30 to 50 pages of reading, maybe a bit more related to the topic. Sometimes we'll set a speech to watch or something like that. For the tougher stuff, like serious political philosophy in the first term, that can be a bit shorter, so around 30 to 40 pages. If it's like narrative history or whatever, then it's going to be a bit longer. But the reading is an essential part of the whole experience. The person asked, they recall that we were talking about the likes of Zizek Tooze and Christopher Lasch. I have a deep affection for Christopher Lasch, so yes. I think Lasch is certainly part of our first term, but we have this broad range of readings that we're doing. So one of our questions is, in the first term, we do a session on what is the left, and then what is the right, and we're reading like classic texts from the history of these great political movements and really trying to drill down and answer those questions. What I think is important is that there's a great range of ideological diversity, I suppose you call it, for want of a better word, ideological diversity and variety. And we're really putting these interesting texts in front of you, and then getting the fellows to discuss them in detail for 90 minutes, which I think everybody reads the text, everybody reads them in detail. And it's an absolutely fantastic experience in the room, and something which often isn't even replicated in universities, actually. Right, okay.
We've had a question come in. I'm happy to pick up if you have
go for it, Aaron.
And you can have a read through of some of the rest. So really good question here. So for the public leadership program, it says your selection criteria mention a requirement for a strong record of success. Can you clarify how you define and assess this? And how do you make sure that's not inadvertently favouring individuals who've got more traditional markers of success? So a couple of answers to give you an example. I was talking this afternoon with someone who's considering applying, who works in education. He is a head teacher, and so in his case, someone looking in education would say, okay, have you taken a leadership role, and can you show us something? Is your school a good school, basically, or what have you achieved within that? But we're looking for people from loads of different domains. So likewise, if you worked in medicine, what have you done? What have you achieved? How can you show that you've had an impact which is impressive? If you've worked in business, what are the things that you've achieved? What have you set up, and so on? So there's a wide range, and in one sense, the answer is it's success within your own domain, right? So if you work in schools and you're a head teacher by the time you're 28, and then you've got an Ofsted outstanding, that's an indication that you're doing a pretty good job there. The other aspect of this is, okay, being a head teacher and getting outstanding Ofsted results is what you could say a traditional marker of success. I don't think it's an awful marker, but we do within the application form ask you, what have you achieved which is unusual for your peer group? And so that's your opportunity to tell us, look, I'm a head teacher, we got nowhere near outstanding, but actually I went to a school that was really struggling, and here are the things that we did achieve. And so there's room for you both. We ask you to upload a CV, we ask you to tell us in your own words what you've achieved. So there's room for you both to show markers of success that would be sort of broadly legible, and to explain for yourself, what shows that you are a great person and would be in a position to make the contribution we're hoping for to public life. Jack, does that give you enough of a breather?
Perfect, thank you. One from Munira, I think now, which is, how are you ensuring this is non-party political, both on candidate selection and on the contents of the curriculum?
Yep, another good question. So as I mentioned earlier, we have speakers on the programs, but also our wider events program, who represent the broad political spectrum from different political parties and non. In terms of the applicants in previous years for the fellowship, we've had people on that program who come from different political parties or who have no party affiliation at all. And one of the joys of the program, and one of the great aspects of learning, is that people get to disagree with each other and argue with each other about what they think, and surprisingly sometimes even agree with each other. And that's part of the way that we operate. We think it's really important that people who have different perspectives can talk and be frank with each other. So we strive very much to ensure that people feel welcome and have a chance to talk. But as I say, surprisingly, there are also lots of agreements, and there are some subject areas where we think there is actually a degree of consensus around, for example, the importance of security and national security, the importance of economic growth. These aren't ideas or aspirations that are exclusive to any single political party. So it's important that we have a kind of discussion about these areas without having to be tribal about them.
Great, thanks, Munira.
And I should add, we have on our advisory board as well people from different political traditions as well, and they've been very helpful in helping us shape the curriculum and think about the speakers and the participants.
Great, thank you. So another question that we have in here is, I'm 31 years old with 8 years of career experience, which program should I apply for? That's a very good question. So while the fellowship is often best suited, I think, to those earlier in their careers, so we've said typically those in their 20s, this person, your specific situation, it might actually fit into either program. So if you still feel like you're building foundational knowledge, you want a more intensive year-long curriculum, then the fellowship's for you. If you've accumulated significant leadership or management experience, and your focus is a bit more on an immediate transition into elected office or senior role, then I think the public leadership program is probably going to serve you better. To be honest, in these borderline cases, it doesn't hugely matter which program you apply for, because we're across both applications. The applications themselves, the questions are relatively similar. So we'll just sort the applicants into the program that's right for you. Okay, there's loads of questions coming in.
And you only need to apply to one program, so don't apply twice and save yourself the effort of answering 2 sets of questions.
Yes, you only need to apply for one program. What if I don't live in London? So we would love in future to be able to run things like this across the country, but for now, all our sessions are in person in London, and we think that's excuse me. We think that's really important. Excuse me. We think that's really important to allow fellows to properly gel together, to really meet each other, to have proper in-person conversations, and to create that really tight-knit cohort feel. But we do provide expenses for travel expenses for people who need to commute. So in our first cohort, we had a fellow who commuted from Edinburgh every Wednesday, which showed extraordinary commitment. And I don't think he ever missed a session, actually. So we were very happy to pay for his travel expenses to make sure he could fully participate. There's another question which somebody else has asked, which is about the work experience options, which I can't remember if I mentioned in my 10 minutes at the top. But for people perhaps who live outside of London, but not necessarily just that, if you want to transition into some kind of more Westminstery role that you're not currently in, we're happy, if you're the right person, to sort out work experience placements for you for the year of your fellowship experience. So that would essentially be a full salary job working at a think tank or other SW1 Westminster style institution. That's, I think, particularly important for those who don't currently live in London or don't currently have a job in London and would like to be able to come here for the fellowship. I think that probably answers that, unless, Munira, you think there's anything else on that bit? No.
There's a question on the form that you can fill out, and if you are interested in a work placement, just tick that box, and then we can pick that up separately at interview.
Thank you. Someone says, I'm a recent graduate. I'm applying for jobs at the moment, but don't have any significant work experience. Is it too early to apply? For the fellowship, I suppose. No, go for it. It may be that it's a bit too early for you because you haven't yet had the chance to build up, some of that work experience, or to build or create your own projects. But we don't want to be too bounded by some of these things that we're setting out. So if you've only just graduated, you're 21 or whatever, and you think the fellowship might be for you, then yeah, go for it. Okay. How are you? This is probably one for Munira. How are you planning to measure whether your programs have impact? That's a good question.
So it's obviously very difficult to measure whether the politicians that we've got have improved over the course of the next 10 years, and to give ourselves credit for that. But we do have certain things that we measure. So we certainly measure the experience that the fellows have on the programme, and we track that quite closely. And I'm pleased to say that for the first 2 years, the response and the feedback from the fellows has been universally very positive. And that's the testament of that is that lots of our previous fellows have recommended and encouraged other people to apply. So I think that's a pretty good endorsement of the experience. And lots of those fellows have gone on to make connections. I think it's fair to say quite a few of them would say that because of their experience and their involvement with us, they've met people who would then help them to get other jobs and to move into closer to the field and closer to where they want to be. So that's, I think, a good sign. And we will track and keep tracking our cohorts over the years. With the public leadership programme, we hope to see slightly more immediate impact because obviously this is an older group of people, more likely and more willing, hopefully, to either stand for office or go into transition into public roles. And we will also measure the impact of that and ask them to what extent things that they have learned and the things that they have done as a result of being involved in our sessions has helped to both inform their decisions of their career, but also when they eventually end up in public roles, has helped them to become better decision makers, more informed about the kinds of areas that they're working in. So we see this very much as a long-term project. It's not something that will necessarily change things overnight, but as that old saying goes, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. And we feel the same, that this is something that we need to start doing now if we're going to build the kind of leaders and the kind of government that we want to see in the future.
Great, thank you very much, Munira. Someone asks, for the fellowship, are you likely to be looking for applicants that are in their late 20s? Might I be limited by being slightly younger in age? I sort of answered this with the other question, but no, not at all. We're looking for a broad range of people. So I think on the current fellowship, the youngest person is 21 or 22, and the oldest is 30, 31. So it's generally people in their 20s, but we're not looking really for anyone in particular in there. I think there's another question which somebody asked, which Harry, you might be able to answer, which is there an upper age limit for the public leadership programme?
For legal reasons, there isn't. I'd say if you're 65 and wondering whether it's not impossible to enter politics at that stage, but we may not be the springboard that you're looking for. And as with all things, you're often, you're looking for potential, if you like. So again, if you're 65 and you're like, I'd like to enter politics, you have had 45 years of professional life and maybe the opportunity to do that. So the question we might be asking your interview is, what's changing now? Now, maybe you've just been enraged by the last 6 months or 5 years or 15 years, and that's been your inspiration. So I'm going to say no. Everyone is very welcome to apply. But I think there is a point in many people's life and career where they sort of feel like they have got to the end of one career, they've achieved a set of things that they wanted to achieve, they're looking for another one, which is somewhere early to mid-career, and that's probably where we expect most of the people who will end up on the programme will come from.
I will just add, if I can, every individual is very different and has a different life story, and some people make a transition into politics quite late in life, and that's fine. What we would like to see in the application is something of an explanation about why now, what's your motive. We're trying to understand every individual, and we also read through every application. We don't automate it and use AI. We look at people as individuals and as human beings, and we are trying to get to your life story. So if you can explain it, then we're definitely interested.
Great, thanks, Munira. There's a question here. Do you have a view if it's appropriate for existing early career civil servants to apply for the fellowship, thinking about impartiality concerns, or would you advise against? No, that's absolutely fine. We're non-party political. We've had civil servants complete both cohorts. I think at the moment we've got 2 or 3. So yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. And we encourage you to apply. Some quite specific questions now. I don't want to get too into the weeds. But someone asking, are we able to share the weekend retreat and the travel dates now? Because this person might already have commitments. We can't do it right now, but we'd hope to do it by the time of the interview, so that you've got a chance to work out whether you can actually do the program or not. So we likely share with you the term dates, the dates of the weekend retreats, and also the trip to Singapore in advance. Okay, there's still quite a lot coming in. One question: how competitive is entry to the programs? I think we've sort of answered that a little bit already, but just to reiterate, the programs do attract a really quite large pool of applicants. So as I said, over the first 2 cohorts, the fellowship just on its own has received hundreds of applications for just 14 places. So while we obviously encourage anyone who's passionate about public life to apply, it's important to also understand that the selection process is really quite rigorous and focuses on identifying not just that raw talent, but also commitment, intellectual curiosity, readiness to benefit from and contribute to the cohort, I suppose, as well. And also applicants who show this strong track record of having done stuff off their own back, heterodox and curious thinking as well, and this genuine drive to serve the public interest. They tend to stand out when we're assessing applications. I think quite a lot of that applies to the public leadership program as well. This may well have to be the last question, I think, unless you guys, when you're looking through those questions, see if there's any that you particularly want to answer. Will the candidates on the public leadership program also get to go to Singapore? Unfortunately not. So the fellowship,
hoping you pick this one up. There are flights there every day, and we're looking for successful people who are able to book their own flights and so on. Regrettably, I mean, I'd love to go back to Munira and say, look, we all need to go to Singapore for a week. And so if the smart, successful, highly agentic people who are hoping to apply, they are welcome to put together a business case and work with me, and then we'll talk nicely to Munira, or we'll just, have a whip round and organise for ourselves. But sadly, that is a privilege for the fellowship, is the sort of organised one that Civic Future puts on for the moment.
We've had a couple of questions that are asking about the application form, and particularly what kind of answers we think you should write. So people answer them slightly differently. Some people write as if very straight prose, almost like policy documents. Other people write from a personal point of view, from the heart. That's fine. We're looking for people's personality, and we're looking for interesting answers. So you write as you feel you want to. We don't have a kind of strict view about the sort of style and format and so on. There are a couple of other questions here. We've talked about work experience, and we talked about the reading. I don't know if there are any others that I've missed, guys, that we should try and pick up.
No, someone's asked about we're seeking individuals interested in standing for public office, but does prior experience, including an unsuccessful candidacy, have any impact on eligibility or consideration? That's probably one for you, Harry.
Yeah, I mean, if you're claiming that you're interested in standing for public office, having previously stood for public office is quite a good indicator that you're heading in the right direction. And we want to not just to attract more great people into public life, but to make sure that when they get there, they're in a position to really do good. So I think it works it works to your advantage. Now, clearly, if you've stood in half a dozen seats over the last few elections, we might say, actually, your term will come and we can't add anything there. But yes, definitely not a disadvantage and quite possibly an advantage.
I think for both the programs, we look to recruit a mix of people. So some people will have more knowledge of Westminster politics, may have stood. Some people will be complete outsiders and have built a career in a completely different field. And the experience of the first 2 years shows us that diversity of profession, that diversity of knowledge and perspective is really, really valuable. And so, as we said a few times, we don't have a kind of a single stereotype of who should be applying and what kind of background you have, but that's just something to bear in mind. It is very competitive, and there are lots of great people that we've met in the first 2 years who we've just not been able to give a place to, who are definitely deserving of one. What we've been saying to people is apply anyway. It's good for you to be on our radar. And if the fellowship or the public leadership program is not right for you, we will try and direct you to other things that we're doing. And in many cases, we end up meeting one-to-one with people. So we can't guarantee that in all cases, but we try and use this as a way of finding good people as well.
Brilliant.
Okay. Quite a nice question here. If you're looking for new ways of thinking, how do you guard against old establishment and perhaps failed thinking being rehashed by, for example, former ambassadors speaking about foreign policy, which is a good question. So I guess two answers. One, we think careful study and deep thinking about these questions is probably a pretty good start and allows us to learn from experience. And some of the readings we'll draw in come from people who are explicitly critical of decisions made over the last 5, 10, 50 years. And the second is we don't have a party line on this is what a good solution is and this is what a bad solution is. What we want to do is convene smart people with a diversity of opinion and allow them to think through the issues for themselves, which is to say, if someone stands up and says X, Y, and Z has been a success, it's very much on you to think to yourself, or perhaps politely say, I'm not so sure that is the case, and to work out what a better approach would have been. But yeah, so it's a great caution. So yes, appreciated.
Brilliant. Okay. I think, guys, unless you think there's any questions there that we haven't already answered in one way or another, we can leave it there. If you've got a personal question, you know our email address. So do drop us a line and we'll see what we can do to help. Yeah, if something comes to mind this evening, tomorrow, whenever, send it to info@civicfuture.org and we will get back to you. But for now, thank you very much for joining, and we look forward to reading all your applications. Thanks a lot. Thank you.